Okay, today we're going to learn how to do a serpentine belt on a 2011 Kia Sorento with a 2.4 4-cylinder dual overhead cam 16 valve engine. First of all, I want to start. Here's a look at the belt diagram on this vehicle, and unlike some other vehicles, there's at least 8 different pulleys to wrap around on here. So take a good look at that. And of course, if your car is slightly different model, or you're doing a V6 or whatever, make sure you get this diagram right before you start. Now, to get started on this vehicle, to get access to the belt, you're gonna have to take this wheel off. So you're gonna have to jack up the car, put some stands under it, take the wheel off, then there'll be a cover behind that, 4 screws. We'll have to take that off. Of course, before you jack up a car like this in the front, make sure the parking brake's on, and you might want to put a chock front and back of one of the rear tires on the diagonal side. Now, since I want to put a jack stand under here, I'm going to jack up on this frame right here on the left side, which will give me a good base to get a car jack under. I'm going to jack it up, and then I'm going to put the jack stand where you would put the jack in the event that you would put a spare tire on that front passenger side wheel. Okay, so when you do the front passenger side wheel, this is the area right here. You'll put a jack stand under that metal area. You can see maybe there's a little bit of wear there from past jack stands, but that's the safest place to keep the vehicle up, keep it from falling. Now, one thing that you notice here is you've got the belt, and you can see that the fender well is really close to where the belt goes. So you will need to go to the auto parts store. I choose Advanced Auto Parts, and you can pay a deposit, check out a serpentine belt wrench, and then when you bring the wrench back, you get your deposit back. So it's free to rent the tool, and I happen to buy the serpentine belt from Advanced Auto Parts as well. They did not pay me to do this, but that seems to be my go-to store here where I live. This is the power built 13-piece serpentine belt kit, and you can see it comes with some sockets. What you'll notice is these are lower profile sockets than a typical socket. So these are maybe 2 centimeters wide, and you'll see that the wrench that uses it is a very narrow wrench. So this isn't like a typical socket wrench. This allows you to get into that narrow area without much trouble, and it gives you a very long leverage arm, which you're going to need so you can pull that belt off and then use your other hand to get the other belt off. If you don't want to rent one of these tools, you can use a big crescent wrench and try to get in there, but you'll probably have to use 2 hands on the wrench to pull the belt loose enough, and then have a second pair of hands to get the belt off, and putting the belt back on could be a little bit tricky as well. So highly recommend using this tool. Now, here's a couple of rubber wheel chocks that I stuck under the back driver's side wheel. This is the diagonal from the wheel I'm taking off. This will keep the car from possibly going back and forth should the emergency brake not be enough. This is to be safe. Here's a spot on the frame that I chose as a safe spot to put this jack under. Again, I'm only going to be under here long enough to get a jack stand under the jacking point. And then when I lower the car, this is where I'll have to put the jack again so I can get it off the jack stack and lower it down. Now, if you're from Kansas City, jack stack sounds like a barbecue place. Now, when you get your jack stands, you want to make sure that they go high enough. This vehicle does sit up higher off the ground than a typical car. So I had some jack stands, but they were just too short. So I purchased these. I believe I got these at Harbor Freight just to get something economical, and I don't use them real often, so figured that was good enough quality. But check the height there, make sure they go into that height range, whatever you have. Now before you jack up the car, because you put a lot of torque loosening the lug nuts, you want to make sure you loosen each one of these 5 lug nuts before you jack it up. And when I say loosen, I just mean like a quarter to half turn, just enough to get them to where when it is up in the air, you can take them off the rest of the way without much effort. One other thing I wanted to point out, I showed a picture of the size in there, but these are 21-inch lug nuts, and you probably need a deep socket to get to these so you can stay out of the way and not scratch your own wheels. Okay, now you want to jack this up till the tire just clears, and you can get the clicker on the jack stand up to where you need it. And that's in the event if your jack, like in this case, maybe has a really slow hydraulic leak. You don't want the car to start coming down on you, so you never want to hold it with just the jack. Okay, now I'm taking the wheel off, and you can see there's this plastic cover here, and it does have a hole in it with a nut bolt or something in there, but that's not the right bolt to do the belt tensioner. And I want to make sure, always put the wheel down with the backside facing the ground, because you don't want to scratch your rims if you're picky like me. So that's a little tip. And now in here, if you look up, there's 4 of these going around the trim, with one kind of in the front here. And I believe that's a 10 millimeter, but I'll verify that here in a second. Yes, that is indeed a 10 millimeter. There's a lot of things to work your wrench through as you get in here. Some of these are kind of deep, so you may want one of those socket extensions. And I have a shorter one there, and I have a longer one here if needed. It's very hard to get like a power drill or anything in there as well, so you might be hand turning a wrench on this one. And once you get that loose with your wrench too, you can use the extension. It's kind of like a screwdriver, and they'll come out much quicker. It's right here. Gotcha. You'll notice there's a washer on each one of these too, so you don't want to lose that. Okay, now after you get the 4 little nuts out, you have this loose piece. You want to work it up and back, and then you can pull it right out the front and keep that together. And now you have access to your belt, so you can run everything around in there. And I believe if you look up here, this belt right here with the wrap belt, so you can see both sides of this belt are completely around it. I believe that's your belt tensioner, and I think it's a 14 millimeter socket. So I'm going to put the belt tensioner wrench together and confirm that can do that. And I'm noticing there's some leak here that you don't want to necessarily see around your pump, so I'll probably have to investigate that here later. I'm going to show you why you want this belt tensioner wrench. So if you take a small socket like this, you generally don't have enough arm on it to muscle the tension that you want. So generally you get a longer arm socket, right? And you're talking about a 1/2 inch, and you can see with a 1/2 inch small 14 millimeter socket on there how wide that is. And to compare that, a belt tensioner socket with the same 14 millimeter is only this wide. So this has the ability to get in a much tighter space, and it has a very long arm bar, so it makes it real easy to do. So it turns out that the belt tensioner is actually a 17 millimeter. So that's the correct size for this. And you can see I have the bar hanging down. And if I turn this bar clockwise, or actually counterclockwise, you should see the belt loosen. See how it's bowing the belt? And when you bow the belt like that, that's how you can pop it off. And I'm gonna do that here real quick, but I can't hold the camera and do that at the same time. So. Okay, so the best place I found is out in the open here. And because this flat bar has it's thin and it's long, it has some flex to it. And because of this suspension piece being curved, you're gonna have to follow the flex into the curve, and you can get it just loose enough to pop off the belt off this first pulley here. And once you get it off there, you can let the belt tensioner go. So I'm gonna take some tension off, pop this wrench out, and then remove the rest of the belt. Now I've seen belts a lot worse than this one, but there is 140,000 miles on this car, and I don't know that the belt's ever been changed. This belt looks like it could have gone longer, but if the belt certainly breaks, you're pretty much dead in the water. It's probably safe to go ahead and change this anyway. Now here's the part where you're going to reference your belt diagram. And I've got the car up in the air still, right? And I think I'm going to make sure the belt's in a good position with the inside on the inside and the outside on the outside as a big O, for example. And I'm going to hang it from this top pulley first and let gravity work it down, and then I'll get down there and use my hands to manage it from there. But I think I'm going to get it on the top first, feeding it down through, and see how that goes. And you can see I've got it hung on the pulley nice, threading it underneath that top, which is this part right here. And the outside piece actually is going to run not straight down, but down through at an angle. Right now I don't have that set up, but I'm going to start working it around like the diagram. And to do that, I'm coming back down to the bottom. You can see the belt hanging down from the top. So I'm just gonna have to get dirty just to take out some slack, get some of this belt out of the way. I went ahead around this outside pulley coming down from the top there. And the smooth sides always are on the smooth side of a pulley. If you see ribs in the pulley, that's where the face side down with the ribs need to go. So that's kind of a trick to know if you're on the inside or outside with the belt too. As you follow the belt around, and you probably get confused because I think there's like 5 passes of belt in this small area, and it looks like the belt's even rubbing up against each other, which it won't do once the belt's back under tension. But what you want to do is leave a piece, so as you're tensioning the belt, right now without putting a wrench back on the tensioner, it's much too tight. You can see to get it back on the pulley. But when you put the wrench on it, you'll get some slack. And you want to leave the last pulley to put a belt on close to where you're at. So I'm hoping this big pulley here is a good spot. Okay, so new belts are really tight. And to try to get it on this wheel here, this is connected to the engine, right? That could be even the main drive wheel, I'm suspecting, and that's why that nut was poking through in case somebody had to crank the engine around. This pulley here spins, so when you have a tight belt, it helps to have it spin so you can like roll the belt on. And the other thing is, to use the belt tensioner wrench, there's just not enough room to be able to get enough tension to get the belt on and off in this particular vehicle. So what you need to do is probably get the longest 17 millimeter wrench that you can. And this is good because it allows you to get any angle you need, right? And get as much space as you can to pull this counterclockwise and release that tension. And it's going to take some effort with this. If you have a piece of pipe that'll go around your wrench, you might be able to extend that a little. But yeah, definitely you want the longest 17 millimeter wrench you can. But it's important to have the multi-notch, because with just 6 to go around in like the sockets that came with this particular set, instead of them coming with a 12-sided socket, I think it came with a 6. You can't get the right angles that you need to utilize the space that you have. If it had a different socket, I think that set would have been good. But anyway, I'm going to use this 17 millimeter wrench, and I'm going to pull it around this pulley here, and it's definitely going to take both hands. So, okay, so the belt's back on, but I will tell you this. I thought I could put it down on this bottom pulley, but I needed my next door neighbor to come over, and what I did is I left this last pulley on the top to be the one to do. So while I was pulling on the wrench to do the belt tension from below, you kind of need somebody on this top piece to snap this on the top. And if the belt seems tight, I'll tell you this, it usually means it's off of one of the pulleys slightly and you're not able to get enough tension on it. But if you ensure that the belt's on all the other pulleys just right, it should be fairly simple to get it up on top of this pulley here. So that's good. So let's start it up and make sure it's working. Okay, we started the car up and the belt's turning fine. It's not running right now. I went ahead and shut it back down. But so now all we do is put the cover back on, just reverse of what we did to take it off, put the wheel back on, jack up the car slightly, remove the jack stand, lower the car, and then when the tire hits the ground, that's when you torque the wheel on. So you put it on while it's up in the air. After you lower the car and you got the bolts kind of tight, you go ahead and torque them when you got the ground there to keep the wheel from turning. So that's it. Hope you have success, and like I said, it'll be easier if you find a really long 17 millimeter wrench. The tool that we had probably would have worked if it had a 12-point socket, but it did not. So good luck.